Good morning, everyone. How are we this morning? Nobody blew away yesterday, right? Well, it is my distinct pleasure to invite up our first speaker, Katie Ralston-Howe. She is the Director of Workforce Division at North Dakota Department of Commerce since January 2020 and has led the state's Workforce Development Council since joining the Commerce team in October of 2019. Over the last couple of years, Katie has effectively increased board member engagement, leading the council to develop a cohesive system for researching workforce issues and developing comprehensive recommendations that influence policies and funding allocations in the 67th North Dakota Legislative Assembly and in Governor Burgum's accelerated North Dakota proposal, which received a $20 million appropriation in the 2021 special session. Katie leads the state's Find the Good Life Talent Attraction Initiative, which has led to several relocations in our state since launching in 2022. Let's welcome Katie Ralston-Howe.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much to the Minot Chamber EDC for having me today. I really love having the opportunity to talk about the great work that we are doing, not only with the North Dakota Department of Commerce, but through the Workforce Development Council. So a little history, I love context. The Workforce Development Council is a federally mandated state workforce board, so every single state in the nation has a state workforce board. Our board is really charged with the task of advising the governor and public concerning the nature and extent of workforce needs in our state and identifying ways to address those needs while maximizing available resources and eliminating unnecessary duplication of efforts. Our membership is comprised primarily of business members. 51% of our membership comes from industry. We have nearly every major industry in the state on our board right now. 20% of our membership comes from labor organizations, and then education, so K-12, post-secondary, adult education, and career and technical education are all represented on our board currently. We also have local and state elected officials. One of our former members, Senator Burkhardt, represented the Minot area, but also was our sole member from the Senate on our board until last year. And so we have also a couple of mayors on our boards. We're really bringing in local and state perspective from an elected official standpoint. We also have some community-based organizations on our board. And then we have state workforce system agencies. So Commerce, of course, Job Service, Department of Public Instruction. Oh, I'm sorry, I just realized Representative Cindy Schreiber-Beck was also on our board as an elected official. Sorry, Cindy. And then other workforce agencies that we have, Department of Corrections is a part of the workforce system, and I'm probably missing a few of the education programs that I talked about are also statewide, bringing in that statewide perspective. Another thing that we think about with our membership when appointing members is where they're coming from. We really value statewide diversification so that we have all four corners of the state represented on our board, so that not all of our members are coming from our largest cities. We also want to make sure we have rural representation as well. Our work centers on 5 core themes. And in a moment here, I'll tell you about the recommendations that we've produced in the past, but our work really focuses on earlier and more diverse career exploration. So really figuring out how we do a better job of connecting young people with career opportunities, work-based learning, the business community in communities all across North Dakota. Addressing the technical skills gap to ensure that we have workers with the appropriate skills they need, not only from a hard skill standpoint, but looking at the 21st century skills, the employability skills, whatever you want to call them, those soft skills that we all need, regardless of the job that we're in. They're really critical to the work that we do. And so that's also a part of the council's focus. Removing barriers to employment. Previously, we really were hyper-focused on those populations that experience more barriers to entering or moving throughout the workforce. So individuals with disabilities, individuals who have been incarcerated, or tribal populations. And now we're looking more holistically at what are those external factors that are impacting somebody's ability to work. Affordable and available housing, that if we don't have houses, it's really hard to attract people to our communities. Childcare, and I know Jessica Thomason's going to be talking about that. That is a huge impact on our workforce, and as employers and maybe as parents, you're probably feeling that in a few different ways. I, for one, am feeling that very recently as I got spit up on my way out the door, was stuck in traffic on my way to drop off. But we're grateful to have a spot, but it is a challenge when it comes to figuring out how we better support our employees and those who are looking to enter the workforce. Other barriers are transportation. And so that list could go on and on. So our focus, although we are maybe not the experts in all of those areas, we're bringing in and collaborating with those who are. And so we're looking at other boards, commissions, task forces on the work that they're doing to address some of those initiatives. And then we're supporting the work that they're doing too. Occupational licensure reform is a big one for us. We've spent the last several years looking at how we remove barriers to employment for licensed professionals, and I know that the Minot community feels that in a really big way with the military base here. Military spouses and are licensed at a higher rate than most of the workforce, and so that's a big area of focus for our board as well. And then, of course, recruitment and retention of workers. For years, ever since I came into my job in 2019, we've had more jobs than people to fill them. And so recruitment of workers is really critical. And then keeping the folks that we have, whether it's students or current workers, we want to make sure that we are able to retain as many as we possibly can. So part of our focus is developing strategies to bring people here and then keep them once we've got them, which, to be really honest, in North Dakota can be pretty easy because it's easy to fall in love with the place that we all live. So I mentioned a moment ago that part of what we do, and actually a really big part of what we do, is develop recommendations to address the workforce challenges that we have in our state. A lot of our recommendations do require some sort of legislative action, and we produce a biennial report of recommendations. And so today I'll tell you a little bit about our current report of recommendations for the 2023-2025 biennium, and then we'll be able to kind of hint at some of our recommendations that are yet to be released later this fall. They've been approved by the council, but we're waiting approval from the governor's office. And so I don't want to get ahead of them on an announcement, but I can certainly tell you what some of the council's priorities are moving into this next legislative session. So a few things to keep in mind when it comes to our recommendations are we have several guiding principles that we consider anytime we're looking at how we want to craft the recommendations that we'll bring forward for the next legislative session. First is statewide impact. We want to make sure that we're prioritizing initiatives that are going to impact the entire state, recognizing that sometimes it makes sense to have a pilot program that maybe exists in a few parts of the state or certain communities or certain partners, but the goal really is to be able to scale it statewide when we have those instances. We encourage private sector partnership. This is really critical and honestly kind of easy with how our membership is structured with 51% private business representation on the board. We do have that buy-in and that input with every single recommendation that we put forth. And I also should note that our recommendations are developed in a subcommittee format. And so we have subcommittees that are aligned with each of those 5 themes that I talked about a moment ago. And our subcommittees are not limited only to Workforce Development Council members. We bring in other voices from around the state to those subcommittees to help inform what those council's recommendations are. And so they're developed at the subcommittee level, then brought up to the full council for approval, typically in the 3rd quarter of every even-numbered year in preparation for legislative session. So that was a quick side note to say that if ever there's an opportunity or you're looking for an opportunity to get involved to support the Workforce Development Council, our subcommittees are a really great way to participate in our process. Coordinating and maximizing federal resources. This has really come to light in recent years with so many federal dollars being made available in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. Naturally, there are always federal programs, and many of the the state agencies that are involved in the Workforce Development Council do receive federal dollars for the work that we do. And so we're really evaluating ways that we can maximize the funds that they have and maybe braid those federal funds with state funds and private investment too, to make sure that we're able to make the biggest impact. A really good example of how we've maximized federal resources is through the Regional Workforce Impact Program, or RWIP. Some of you may have heard that. I know the Minot Chamber EDC has been a really core player in utilizing and helping other organizations in the Minot community and surrounding area utilize those dollars that were made available under the American Rescue Plan Act a few years ago for our first round of the RWIP, which is a really good example of a program that had or has statewide impact. It's maximizing federal dollars, and it required local match. And a lot of that local match came from private business. So if your organization was involved in matching any RWIP programs in this community, thank you for your investment, because you've been a part of something really big for your community and for North Dakota. As we're really working to activate and energize locally led workforce solutions. So that's a really good example of how we've been able to take a Workforce Development Council recommendation, which was the RWIP. The council recommended the RWIP a few years ago when, every state got this tranche of ARPA funding, and Governor Burgum put out a call for ideas on how we can utilize that funding in preparation for a special legislative session in 2021. And the council produced an idea for a program that would help support locally led workforce solutions, which later became the Regional Workforce Impact Program. And I take full credit for a really bad acronym, RWIP. I'm not a marketing or branding pro, but it's actually caught on, and it's been a good program despite several bumps and headaches along the way. But that's such a good example of how the council has produced something that is continuing to make a really big impact. The next piece we look at are scalable solutions. And I talked about that pilot program approach. That's newer for the council. Prior to 2019, when I came, I'm not as aware of what kind of pilot programs they may have recommended before. I can really only go back to October 2019 to look at the work that had been produced just before I came, and then the work that we've been doing here moving forward. But that's been really helpful in terms of getting legislative support. One of the things that I've noticed is that North Dakota supports education in a really big way. But dedicated workforce development initiatives have to work a little harder to get buy-in, because it's really hard to see return on investment with workforce. It takes a while. It takes a while to go through the school system. It takes a while to convince someone to move from across the country to our state. It takes a while for adults to retrain and reskill, to go through a new program to get ready for a new career. And so it takes a little while to see that ROI. And so this pilot program approach has given us the ability to say, all right, let's try it in a concentrated area, and then bring in this body of work to go to the legislature and say, okay, we tried it with limited resources for a short amount of time. This is the impact that we saw in 6 months or a year or whatever that might be. And now can we get bigger investments so that we can do this so that we can scale this initiative moving forward. We've seen that work in a few different areas, and I'll touch on that here in a little bit, but that model has been helpful for us because we certainly don't expect blind investment from the legislature. So we've been able to demonstrate a little bit some of the work that we're able to do on a smaller scale and then build from there. Next is balancing current and future needs, and I will tell you this is one of the hardest. Boxes for us to check, because we all are feeling the pinch right now for workers. There's such an acute need for workers in a variety of industries. And so how do we solve the current challenges while also planning for the future? That's really tough because we need workers right now. But it's tough for us to say, to just go out and find all the workers that you need. We kind of have to play the long game when it comes to developing our recommendations. And the other piece with this too is that, I just lost my train of thought. It'll probably come to me. The other challenge with this is that with a biennial legislative cycle, we can have a really good idea in the beginning of a biennium. We can build it out, and by the time we get through the next legislative cycle, which could be a year and a half later, there could be a new opportunity, a new idea that could be more pressing. The moment might pass in that year and a half it takes to wait for the next legislative cycle so that we can get investment. So that is a bit of a challenge, and we have seen that a few times where we get really excited about certain programs, and then there's a pandemic, and then all of those really good ideas that you had need to be tabled for a while, and then we get to bring them back, or sometimes none of them come back because the opportunity has passed, the moment has changed, and now we need to solve for different problems. And so we're trying to be as nimble as we can given the structure that we're in, but we also have the opportunity to be really thoughtful in what we're producing, and we try to think of opportunities, programs, priorities that are going to be everlasting, not so trendy maybe. The last one is considering priorities versus programs, and this is also really challenging because on a local level and even a national level, we hear of really cool things that are happening. We hear of organizations across the country that have a specific program or a specific product that they're using. Well, the council's role, we learn about all of these things, we get very excited about them, but our role is not to endorse specific products. Our role is not to recommend for legislative consideration a specific tool or product, because of course we have to follow the state's procurement agency procurement policies, and so we can't say everyone should use Tide laundry detergent. We could say the priority is that everyone should probably have access to clean clothes, and so we should have a consideration for investment in the tools necessary to do that. We can't say everyone should have Tide laundry detergent. A more applicable example here is our Find the Good Life program. 2 years ago, I guess in our 2021 report of recommendations, so I guess in the last biennium, we had a recommendation for a statewide talent attraction initiative. That is the priority. North Dakota needs to invest resources in attracting workers to North Dakota. The Department of Commerce took it upon ourselves to say, okay, what does the statewide talent attraction program look like? Through that, we relaunched Find the Good Life in North Dakota, which is a talent attraction initiative that combines targeted marketing and a system for tracking workers and their families as they're considering making a move to North Dakota. So the council said talent attraction. They did not say Find the Good Life. Commerce said, all right, let's develop Find the Good Life and launch this. We did not actually get investment for Find the Good Life in that first legislative session. We used some discretionary dollars to pilot the program in partnership with the Workforce Development Council. They had awareness of this as we were in those early building phases and vetting the idea and figuring out how best to invest the dollars that we had. And then we went back to the legislature last year and said, okay, we took the council's recommendation for a talent attraction initiative. We built Find the Good Life. We've been piloting this for 6 months. Here's what we have to show for results. Can we get investment? And we did, to the tune of $12 million to help recruit workers. And so that's a really good example of how we went through many of these guiding principles, both as a council, but as a state agency, to help build something that then gained some traction from a really practical standpoint, but also got some investment moving forward. Ultimately, we're working to answer the question of what makes the most sense to put resources behind right now. There are some ideas, like I mentioned, that the moment passes and it doesn't maybe make as much sense to invest right now in this moment. And then there are others that are really timely, and it makes a ton of sense to get some investment from the legislature right now. And so really trying to figure out what's urgent, what's timely, and maybe what isn't. Also, we have to consider what doesn't even need legislative action, because there are some things that the council can recommend that don't require legislative action, and that's okay. We have some of that. We don't have a ton of it, but every biennium we'll have a couple of recommendations that are really directed to maybe state agencies for the programs that they're already operating that were maybe previous recommendations of the Workforce Development Council. That's the only time the council can recommend an existing program by name is if they've already recommended it as a priority and it became a formal program within a state agency. That's the only time we'll kind of bend our own rule a little bit. So those are the things that we're focused on right now for guiding principles, for our recommendations. Other things to keep in mind, and these are more recent within the last couple of years, are building on work that's already completed. We don't need, every 2 years, we don't need to, wipe the slate clean and move forward with brand new ideas every single time, especially because, as I mentioned before, it takes a little while to see return on investment. How do we look at and really evaluate what we've already recommended, the work that's already happening, and build on that? How can we revise? How can we enhance? And so those are things that we're keeping in mind too as a council. This is a little newer for us. And then also recommending actionable strategies. When I first came to the Workforce Development Council, the report of recommendations that we were working on was really the first big report that the council had made in a while. And it had, I think, 35 or 37 recommendations, which is a lot. It was 30 plus pages. And not all of them had a real call to action. It was kind of like, well, somebody should make sure we have career academies. Someone should maybe do something about removing barriers for licensed professionals, particularly military spouses. But it wasn't really saying, Department of Career and Technical Education, you need to advance career academies throughout North Dakota. Department of Commerce, you need to work to make sure that we have a 30-day turnaround for military spouses who are moving into North Dakota to work. And so now we've really gotten specific with our recommendations. We are working with state agencies to say, who makes the most sense to move this forward? And how do we work with you to make sure that this recommendation is appropriate? And so we're working with the agencies that are actually tasked with doing the work, and they're actually doing the work, which is amazing. And they probably were before, but it was a little more vague, kind of that approach of, when we used to post job openings on a cork board, and someone could rip off like the bottom thing to call, and it was just kind of a passive way of saying, the post and pray method is kind of what we were doing with our recommendations. And now we're a lot more proactive and working with agencies to make sure the work is getting done. Along those same lines, we're also determining metrics for success. We really before weren't saying, okay, we're going to be checking in with you, and this is how we're going to be measuring success. I will note that the way the council measures success is going to be different than the state agency. The council itself is not doing all of the work to implement the projects and programs that we're recommending. So we might look at success a little differently than the actual agency that's implementing. They're going to have different KPIs than we will to some extent, and that makes sense because they're closest to the work. We don't necessarily know all the hoops they're jumping through to get this work done, and that's probably okay. The board doesn't need to live in the weeds. In fact, we don't want the board to live in the weeds. Our 33 members are volunteers. They are not compensated for their participation on the board. This is certainly not their full-time job, although some would probably tell you they're putting in a lot more hours than they anticipated, because I will tell you, we make our members work. But it's really a work of passion. I think our members are doing this work. They're on the board because they have a passion for workforce development, for solving big problems, and they're making tremendous impact across the state. So I want to talk about our current biennium here really briefly. And well, I shouldn't say briefly. I'm very long-winded if you haven't noticed, so nothing is too brief with me. But last legislative session, we had 10 recommendations. We went from 30 plus, and we said, all right, we need to have like 5 to 10, 7 to 10 comprehensive recommendations. In 2021, or 2020, excuse me, our report, I think, had 13 recommendations, so we got closer. And then in 2021, going into that session, thank you, we got it down to 10 recommendations. And so now we had 10 recommendations and a variety of endorsements. Endorsements are initiatives that the council supports, but we're not the subject matter experts. we're throwing our weight behind supporting these initiatives. A really good example would be the childcare package that the Department of Health and Human Services had in the last legislative session. The council included our support as an endorsement. We are by no means experts in childcare. However, because of the impact that childcare has on our workforce, we threw our support behind it 100%. And so that's an endorsement. Just so you have that distinction as I move through this. 6 of our recommendations required legislative action, and then 3 were kind of introduced and brought into other bills, sometimes without our awareness, which was great. That legislators were looking at our report of recommendations as they were crafting the bills that they themselves were introducing. So that to me tells me that the Workforce Development Council's leadership and report is really being looked at thoughtfully by legislators, saying, we know that this is the owner of the state's workforce strategy. They know what they're talking about when it comes to workforce. And so let's look at these recommendations to make sure that we're moving them through the legislative process appropriately. We also had 4 endorsements, and 3 of them required legislative action. For the first time, we saw 10 of our recommendations and endorsements included in the executive budget, which was tremendous success for us. We saw a ton of attention on workforce in the last session, and in turn with that attention, we also saw a tremendous investment in workforce development. So I'm really grateful to the council for their thought leadership in developing a package of recommendations that was so effective in moving through the legislative process and now is really impacting communities all across the state. I also want to pause here to say thank you to the Minot Chamber EDC for your support, because we as a board can't lobby, we educate and inform. And so, and I say that all the time too, and I noticed a couple chuckles. I think our members know that I say that all the time. It's like a stamp, or like we should all have it on a cap or something. We educate and inform. But chambers and EDCs can lobby. They can talk to legislators in a way we can't. And our recommendations would not move through the legislative process as successfully as they did if we didn't have support from those players, chambers and EDCs, business leaders and communities who are engaging with their legislators to stress the importance of investing in workforce development and looking to our report is huge. This is a team effort that doesn't happen without that kind of support. So thank you to Brecca and other members of the Chamber EDC team for your support, because we really could not get through the ideas that we have, or get the ideas that we have through the process without you. So currently, I just want to point out some of the wins that we've had that might be a little more visible, that received investment in the last legislative session that we're now activating this biennium. First is expanding area career and technology centers. We are sitting in one that I believe received some of the funding from that investment that went to the Department of Career and Technical Education. So I got to be a part of the review team for those proposals, and looking at the way different communities, school districts were collaborating with the business community, with higher education was tremendous. And now it's so fun, a year and a half down the road, sometimes longer if your academy received funding through that special legislative session in 2021, we're seeing these things come to life. We're seeing the impact that they have in the community. We're seeing students get excited about new advanced career and technical education opportunities that they didn't have before. And so I'm really glad that this event was being held in this space, because I hadn't seen it yet. And it's really cool to see dollars to work in this way. The next one is funding for local workforce solutions. That's the regional workforce impact program that I was talking about. To date, we have supported 107 locally led workforce projects. The way we structured that pool of funding was we allocated or reserved a portion of funding for each of the 8 planning regions across North Dakota, depending on or based on their population. It's not perfect, but we had to figure out a way to make sure that every part of the state had access to the funds. And that was kind of the best way we could figure out. We also require 25% match for that program. And so we have local players that are investing financially in activating the ideas and solutions that are being developed by community organizations. So that is a program that we're really excited about. It's making huge impact. Not only did we use $14 million in American Rescue Plan Act funds, but we also received $12.5 million at the last legislative session in general funding to continue operating that program. And so we have a lot of players utilizing those funds to create impact in their communities when it comes to advancing workforce development initiatives. The next one is funding for talent attraction and retention. Find the Good Life I already talked about. Right now we're building a pipeline of job seekers to come to North Dakota. And it's really important to keep in mind that with this kind of initiative, we are really playing the long game. First, marketing is critical. It's really hard to convince someone to move to a place they don't know a lot about. We've done a lot of national surveys. We know that awareness about North Dakota, pretty low. Opinions about North Dakota, fairly neutral because they don't know a ton about our state. So first we have to create some awareness. We have to provide education about our state, the opportunities that exist here, because our opportunities in North Dakota are abundant. So now we're really seeing a lot of great traction with the awareness side of our campaign, and we're able to start bringing in more of that persuasive marketing. Now that you know a little bit about us, why don't you come check us out? We also have, we're the first state in the nation to implement a trackable system that allows us, if someone is interested in giving us their name and telling us a little bit about themselves, we're able to track their journey to North Dakota. So right now, we also, this biennium, created a candidate marketplace, which is our opportunity for employers to interact more directly with job seekers. Before, our system was really reliant on volunteers, like Kelly has been a community champion for our program. And so our system is, when we get a job seeker and it looks like they might be interested in Minot, we'll connect them with someone like Kelly who helps them get connected with employers. Our first win actually came from the Minot Chamber EDC. We had a job seeker from Washington who some of you may have heard about because he was like our poster child for like the first year of our program. But he moved to North Dakota before he had a job. He moved to Minot. And Brecca and Mark worked with him to help find employers that were in his industry. And within days of moving here, he had a job. And he chose to stay. And so it's those stories that we're focusing on. But we also needed to figure out a way to connect employers directly with those job seekers, because some job seekers, although our community champions are great, they don't really want to have that kind of interaction. They just want to find the employer, get the job, and make the move. And so now, if you are not involved in our candidate marketplace yet, I would encourage you to go to the Find the Good Life website and get involved. Our employers that are utilizing that to connect with more than 2,000 job seekers from around the country are loving it. We just had our first hire out of that marketplace, and we have someone moving to Valley City because they were able to connect with an employer through the marketplace. They've been hired and found a place to live, and they're making the move. So we have stories like that happening all across the country. Keep in mind that making a move even across the state is hard. I don't know the last time you all chose to relocate, but moving is an emotional decision. It's one you make with your heart, not with your head. Sometimes it's also very expensive. It costs a lot of money to move all of your belongings from one state to another. We've had movers tell us that they paid $15,000 to get their things to North Dakota, $27,000 to move to North Dakota. This is very expensive, and it's an investment that not everyone is able to make. And so we have to keep in mind that success for a program like this hinges on affordability, the ability to afford that move. It hinges on housing, affordable, available housing in every community. School systems, childcare. We've actually lost movers because they couldn't find childcare. We had a young couple 2 years ago that had both accepted jobs. They were ready to close on a house, but they couldn't find childcare for their 6-month-old And so they couldn't move to a community where they had no other support system. So we lost them. There are bigger problems to solve. There are other problems, I should say, that we need to solve at the community level in order for a program like Find the Good Life to truly be successful. The other thing we have to keep in mind with this initiative is that not everyone is going to enter our pipeline. Totally fine. So one of the metrics that we look at when we're trying to evaluate success are the total employment numbers that we have in North Dakota, which have gone up. I'm actually hearing from employers, some on the Workforce Development Council, others not currently on the council in industries like energy, construction, manufacturing, that are saying, I'm really pleased with our talent pool. We have enough applicants for each of our vacancies. I actually considered not hiring our visa workers for the summer because we are, wait for it, fully staffed. That is a phrase that I had not heard in my entire time at Commerce. And when I asked that employer, when was the last time you could say that? And she said, it's been 10 years at least. So we are starting to see a turnaround. The problem is not solved. It's never going to be fully solved, but we're seeing progress, and that's what we're driving toward. Other initiatives that we would chalk up as wins this year are the creation of our Office of Legal Immigration, which did include the creation of a global talent task force, which was the Workforce Development Council's recommendation for this current biennium. Was we were getting a lot of questions from employers on how do we hire global talent? How do we navigate this immigration system, which is incredibly complex or intricate, as I recently heard it described, and I really liked that word. Well, we didn't know. To be really honest, my strategy at Commerce was when I would get that call, I'd send them to job service. And job service would say, I don't know that we can help you, let's send you back to Commerce. And then we're sending them to the congressional delegation, and that's not helpful. It's not helpful for employers, it's not helpful for us. And so the Workforce Development Council said, all right, let's get a task force together to figure out what the state's opportunity and role is in helping employers navigate this system and recruit workers from around the world. And instead, what we got was even better. There was a bill introduced initially to create an Office of Immigration just for the healthcare industry. And we were able to come in and say, actually, every industry could use support. So let's change this bill. Let's give us some time to really study and figure out what in the world and how in the world do we do this. And now we've done it. If you had asked me 1 year ago when we launched this office and started this study, if we would have workers in the state by the end of the biennium, I would have said you're crazy. And now I'm crazy because it turns out we're going to have workers in the state by the end of the biennium, which is really remarkable. We've been able to partner with national organizations and federal agencies to find ways to help employers recruit, hire, and retain foreign-born talent using available visa pathways throughout the country. So one of the things I want to celebrate here is that North Dakota is leading the way in the way we're doing this. There are 19 other states that have kind of similar offices. Many of them are called Office of New Americans, or ONA, and they were really created out of a need, a humanitarian need, where they had an influx of people coming into their state, whereas North Dakota didn't have that same challenge. We were proactive in creating our office, and we specifically designed ours as a workforce solution. The humanitarian side of this work is really being addressed by Department of Health and Human Services with our Refugee Resettlement Coordinator, and that gives us the space to collaborate, but also to say, all right, we're housed within the Workforce Division with the Department of Commerce. What does that mean? How do we get to be creative problem solvers in this space? And so a couple of the things that we've done recently, in addition to producing a really amazing report that identifies some new opportunities for North Dakota, we also hosted a Global Talent Summit last month, which brought in subject matter experts and immigration attorneys from around the country to educate employers on opportunities that they can pursue moving forward to help recruit, whether it's temporary or permanent workers from around the country, or from around the globe, excuse me. And then we also, I should note that we actually had individuals reaching out to us asking, offering if they could come to North Dakota to be a part of this summit, to present And we were like, our agenda's full. I'm sorry, we don't have room for you. So now that tells us, okay, we have speakers that we can bring in next year too. We also had people from around the country flying into Bismarck just to take part in this summit, to learn from what we were offering, which was really exciting for us to see. Another thing that we did really recently, and you can expect more of this, is we hosted a webinar just last week for employers in the healthcare space on utilizing the E3 visa to attract Australian nurses. And so that was really well received. You can expect to see more educational opportunities like that coming on board as we're developing these partnerships with different organizations that can help provide that kind of education. The last one I'll share is the Job Placement Pilot Program for formerly incarcerated individuals. This is for, this recommendation was for Job Service North Dakota, and they've been partnering with Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation to implement the program. I won't steal Pat's thunder because I know he's speaking here later today, but this is a program that was really under the Removing Barriers to Employment for justice-involved individuals, and we're really proud of the work that they were able to do. And this was a pilot program that now has grown, and it's really fun for us to see the work that's coming out of DOCR and Job Service. So currently, I'll be able to, I can preview, we have 8 recommendations that the council recommended this year, 7 endorsements, the first of which is, hey, let's keep supporting those initiatives that we got support for in the last legislative session, because it's way too soon to pull the plug on any of them. It is way too soon to evaluate true success, because it takes time to get workers into the workforce. It takes time to prepare. It takes time for them to get the job that they're interested in and to stay. And so we're still building in all of these areas, but we're seeing some early wins, which I'm super excited about. We're also looking for some pilot relocation assistance. I talked about the expense of making a move and how that really can be a huge barrier for employers who are working to attract workers and their families to North Dakota. And so we're trying to work through what this kind of program can look like. That would be a matching program for the employer who is probably already working to figure out how they can provide assistance, whether it's helping you, get the moving truck across the country, or temporary housing assistance, or, the options are really vast. And so we're trying to figure out what that program looks like right now, but it is the recommendation of the Workforce Development Council that we work with employers to help them get workers here. The other thing I want to note on that is that if you get workers who are coming through Find the Good Life, please know that they're very serious about North Dakota. We've had some companies reach out to us and say, hey, is this for real? Does this person from Arkansas really want to move to North Dakota? Yes, they are seriously considering North Dakota. So please pick up the phone. Please take the interview. Please consider them along with the other candidates in your pool, because they are very interested in coming to North Dakota to find their good life. Another priority that you'll see really emphasized from the Workforce Development Council this year is a comprehensive approach to promoting and expanding apprenticeships. We see apprenticeship programs working really well across the country, and some states have used them in a really big way to address workforce needs, to train workers, to advance workers, to get them into the workforce. And this has been, we're doing it in pockets in North Dakota, but we can be doing it a lot better. Part of that is awareness, working with students, parents, advisors, and schools to help them really understand what apprenticeships are. They've evolved. They are not just skilled trades anymore. You can have an apprenticeship in teaching, nursing, HR, marketing, the list goes on and on. It's a tremendous pathway to employment. And so we need to work as a state to put some resources behind growing this type of opportunity in North Dakota. It is a federal program, but states across the country are doing it really well. And now is the opportunity for us to step up our game a little bit. So I left just a couple minutes for questions. I'd be happy to, is that okay, Brecca? Can I open for questions or no? 1 or 2 questions, but if you don't have any, I'm getting the sense that that's probably okay. Yes.
Can you explain in detail what they have to do, what kind of commitment is there for a business?
Yeah. Sure. So the candidate marketplace can be found at Find the Good Life. Is it findthegoodlife.com or findthegoodlifend.com? If you Google Find the Good Life, there's a place on there to go. You'll click on the candidate marketplace, and there's a tab for employers to sign up. When you put in your information, that request is going to go to our talent attraction specialist, Sarah Michael. She'll click approve, and you're in. There is no pay to play. There is no commitment of time to be a part of that. Is a service that we are offering for free to employers. So please check that out. It's going to be an excellent tool. So thank you for your one question. And thank you so much for your time and attention today. Thank you.